Eugene Ray Cantwell, EugeneRayCantwell. October 6, 1927, so I'd make me 86. My father's name was Ross Clarence Cantwell, and he was born in West Salem, Illinois. That was a little farming community in southern Illinois. My mother's name was Amy Ruth Manuel. That's M-A-N-U-E-L. And she was born in the country on a farm in southern Illinois also. But where she lived, there were no close schools, or at least beyond elementary. So she went 8 grades, then as was the custom then, was for the students to take the 7th and 8th grade a second time, rather than be at loose ends, you know, after only 6 grades of school. So that's what she did, and that was the custom. I have one brother, one sister. My brother's name is Robert Keith Cantwell, and he is approximately 3 years younger than I am. And he's still living. He lives here in Clermont. My sister, her name was Shirley June Cantwell, and then she married Byron Crowley later in life, and then her name, of course, was Shirley June Crowley. She is 5 years younger than I am. I'm the patriarch. I have a little humorous story, brief. This town of Diedrich was mostly German extraction. Most people, like a couple of generations before, had come from Germany. They worked hard during the week in the farm, and on Saturday they came to town, shopped. The men went to the taverns. We had 4 taverns in a town of 500 people, and drank, got drunk. My father didn't like that. That's the reason we came, one of the 2 reasons we came to Florida was the abusive use of alcohol, and the other was his health. His doctor told him if he came south, he would live longer. One relatively early childhood memory is when I had my tonsils out. I was 5 years old, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed when I woke up, and they asked me what I wanted to eat, and I said, I want ice cream. Well, I came from a very conservative family. For instance, we didn't drink any alcohol, we didn't smoke. Went to church every Sunday. We were Methodist. Anyway, we were very conservative. When we moved to Clermont, moved here on a Saturday, on Sunday the family attended the Methodist church. I mean, only been here one day, but we always went to church.
Was your father strict?
Well, I'd say yes, but we didn't, or at least I didn't seem to mind. I mean, any punishment I ever got, I felt it was justified. And I wasn't punished very often. You know, I was a good boy. I can give you a humorous story there. One of my classmates in school was Bobby Hacker. We were good friends. And one Saturday, I guess it was, he was down at my house. We were playing, and we lived on the main road that went through north-south in Diedrich. So anyway, Bobby Hacker and I were throwing rocks. Now, the road is gravel. Almost no paved road then, it was gravel. We're throwing rocks at the wheels of cars as they go by.
So I noticed this one big rock. Boy, I loved the looks of that rock. And I picked up that rock and I started to throw it, and Gene says, no, don't throw that rock, it's too big. So I laid it back down. but pretty soon he wasn't looking. I picked up the rock again, and I saw this car come in. I figured, well, it's a big rock. I'm going to heft it a little harder.
And of course, there wasn't much traffic. There weren't many cars. Well, my brother was with us. He was 3 years younger, and he threw a rock, and the car happened to be a highway patrolman, and he broke his windshield. So he wet his pants.
I wet the front of my pants. I was scared. I knew I was going to jail for sure. And I turned around and looked. Gene and my buddy weren't there. They were both gone. They disappeared. I had no idea where they were.
Scared. Bobby, Hacker, and I ran. But my brother was so transfixed, he just stood there.
So what happened?
So my mother was home, and Hank the patrolman went and knocked on the door and told her what happened. And she says, well, my husband's down at the store, which is only 1 block away. Go talk to him, he'll settle, or he'll do right. So I guess we paid for a windshield, and my brother probably got his talking to. One of the few toys we had. This was during the wartime, you know. It wasn't set up building blocks. So my brother and I, we could spend hours with the building blocks, making forts, making homes. Then we'd throw blocks at them to tear them down like bombs. And I guess that was. Then one time, like most kids eventually get a tricycle or a wagon, we were given a toy airplane, you know, about regular size as a toy, as wagons and tricycles are, but I remember that tricycle, airplane tricycle. I enjoyed going to school. In the first grade, my teacher was Miss Pierce. She was a old maid, single lady, and had taught her whole life, and she was probably in her 50s. Maybe not that old, but then it seemed old. And in the first grade, there was, I think, 6 boys. This was country, you know, and 3 of us were named Eugene. So apparently Eugene was a popular name at that time.
Well, I can remember the day we left Dietrich to come to Florida. I remember we all piled in the car and we drove around the block past the school. And I thought at the time, I said, it's never going to be the same now. That we're leaving everything I love. So, but it didn't turn out that way. It turned out very well.
The year before we moved, he came. Oh, and I had polio about a year earlier. So he took me with me. They treated me like I was sort of a sickie.
I do remember him having polio. I remember they came and nailed a poster on the front wall of the house, not the end of the house. And my dad stayed next door with my grandmother so he could work at the store and wasn't exposed. And I remember the school children coming by the side street, coming by the sidewalk, and my mother would say, "Don't go down the street where the children are." She'd say, "You got to stay back up here in the quarantine."
After my polio experience, because it usually had such a bad ending, so I traveled with him. We came to Winter Haven, and for I guess a week, where he had his former high school principal retired there. So he had invited us down, and my father was looking out for a place to open up a business similar to what he had in Illinois. You know, this was a general store. He sold everything, clothing, all kind of groceries, cow feed, hog feed, everything. So we spent a week there, and now this was in the winter time, and I enjoyed the warm weather there, and in Winter Haven. I was playing with some local kids, and anyway, he decided on a building here in Clermont. There was a vacant building, and so he put down rent to rent the building. Then he was going to open up his business here. So he went back home, and within the year, he made arrangements, rented a house, which is extremely modest. So we moved. We came from Winter Haven to Clermont with most of our earthly goods in the car with us on a Saturday night. And I can remember the town was just bustling, the downtown. We drove through it, which is Montrose and 8th. That was downtown, Montrose and 8th Street. That's where the business was on Saturday, because this was farming area. This was citrus. Citrus was king. And so we moved our stuff in and got right active in the community. It wasn't too long. My father was superintendent of Sunday school, and my mother was a Sunday school teacher, and I made friends. We had 3 sports, one for each season. In the fall was football. As far as I was concerned, football was king. I liked football. In the winter was basketball, just like it is now. In the summer was baseball. And we had pretty good results on the athletic field until Second World War came along. And all of the young men eligible went into service, which left us the schools in a real bind. You know, most all the young males were gone. So one year, the principal not only served as principal, but he also taught chemistry and physics. And I believe he coached the basketball team that year. In another year, little update. We had a military unit signal corps in Clermont, which people that live in the north don't realize that we were fairly close. There were German subs off the coast of Florida. So we had a signal corps, and we had air raids at night sometimes, in which all the lights in town went out, you know, during an air raid, and they'd bring out these huge searchlights to scope for airplanes and triangulate them and send in the position. So anyway, somehow the school hired a sergeant with the signal corps to coach us. I guess he probably had college football experience. Sergeant Allred, so he was our coach one year. My junior year, we didn't have many players. And one game against Groveland, we only had 13 men to suit out. That's not very many for football. And then one of my 2 best friends, one of the stars on the team, got kicked in the head diving for a tackle and got knocked out. That left 2 substitutes. One had to come in, and neither one wanted to come in when they saw my friend down there, but one finally did. But I was so incensed about him hurting my friend. I thought my position on defense was defensive end. And the end's position is to always turn the play in towards the tackle or the line. Never let him get around you, which I did, cut him in. But this time I was so incensed about poor old Marvin getting knocked out, and I had to carry him off. I decided I was going to rush. I was going to rush in there and tackle the runner before we ever got started. So that's what I did. I rushed in there and went to tackle the runner, and all of a sudden, before I hit him, he lateraled the ball off it was a reverse. They went around my end for a touchdown because I left my position. I felt a little guilty about that, but. So we were playing Montverde one night. It had a lighted court. It was a winter cold winter night. The wind was blowing. It was tough. And we were up and down the court, up and down the court. Halftime, we had an 8-4 lead. That's only 8-4. That's not much. We played on through the second half, battling the weather, till finally we had a 12-11 lead with just 2 or 3 minutes left, and we battled and battled back and forth. And I know the time ran out, but the only clock was one in a Montverde teacher's hands, and I know we got cheated. They blew the whistle as soon as they scored a basket, and they then won 13-12. I was incensed, but in that game I did score all of Clermont's 12 points. So I can say I set a record that can never be excelled. They might tie it, which is unlikely, but they'll never score more than all the points. Of course, I was a Methodist because my father and mother was Methodists and attended the local Methodist church, which is only a block from our house. We also had a Christian church, a Lutheran church, and a Catholic church. Then out in the farming area, about every 3 or 4 or 5 miles would be a Catholic church or maybe a Lutheran church. They were all German, and that was expected. The early years, of course, you had one service. You had a piano. I guess I'm talking about in Diedrich, which was pretty basic. But in Clermont, we had an organ. And the first decade or two was pretty traditional, or 3 decades. But in recent years, it has evolved into more contemporary, which some people probably would say that our contemporary churches, or what they call traditional now, they really don't have. I mean, I consider it at best a blended service. So I would like to see changes. I mean, I might say, in the local Methodist church, I joined when we moved the spring of when we moved to Clermont in 40. So you can see how long I've been a member. 74 years. Well, I expect Pearl Harbor. I can remember I must have been 14, and it was a Sunday when we got the news, and we were playing croquet in my front yard. My father came to the door, screen door, and said, "Japan just bombed Pearl Harbor." Well, I thought, war, but it didn't ring any big deal. But then I realized we declared war against them, and then things really changed. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, it changed things in Clermont. You know, we had servicemen stationed there, air raids. We had rationing of gas, rationing of certain foods. All the men went to war and some didn't come home. I think one of my classmates was killed. First, I went 2 years to Florida Southern College in Lakeland, which is a Methodist school.
My dad wanted us to go to a Methodist college, and he wanted us to go particularly to a religious college, because he thought that would keep us on the straight and narrow, which is not necessarily the case.
Then when I became interested in optometry, I applied and went to the Southern College of Optometry in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was the only optometric college in the Southeast. My interest in optometry was through a couple of cousins in Illinois who were both optometrists, father and son. Well, let's see, there's three generations were optometrists. So I became interested in optometry through them. In Florida Southern College, where I attended 2 years. My main activity in sports was through fraternity sports, intramurals fraternity. Although I was on the Florida Southern College basketball team, on the roster anyway. My total career, I scored 2 points. That was against Rollins. Jacqueline R. Cantwell. She was a sorority sister of my sister. They were friends, and she brought her home from college on the weekend, you know, and I got to know her there. And eventually I started dating her. And we usually it'd be a Saturday night date. We'd usually go to a movie and then a hamburger. Pretty routine. I probably wasn't very exciting, I don't know. I think it was just a gradual thing. We got to know each other well, and you just assumed, well, we'll always be together. And it was pretty well confirmed when she was a junior in college. I was practicing. I'd opened my practice in Clermont, and she was still in college. She would have another year to go, and then I received this notice from the Selective Service Board to appear for induction into the Army. This was in 53. So it sort of upset Jackie that I was going to be gone for 2 years. And so I guess we made oral commitments then. So to be engaged, to be married, and opening up a new practice was a bad time to be drafted. Got married in Tampa at a Baptist church in June of '55.
And how would you describe Jackie? Like, what did you admire most about Jackie?
Well, she was a churchgoer. She was a Baptist. I thought she was attractive. I enjoyed being with her. Kenneth Stanley Cantwell and Kathy Susan Cantwell. Kenneth was born in '57 and Kathy in '61. Usually each summer we try to take a vacation. That was a little bit different from the previous summer. So we took a New England trip one year, and we took a Western trip one year. I always made a packet of when we go on a trip, list all the things that we anticipated seeing and their value and their interest. And each of my kids got a packet, and I told them to study that packet. We'd be driving out west somewhere, you know, and one of the kids would say, well, Dad, what about this? I said, look at your packet. One of our routines was after church on Sunday that Jackie would cook our Sunday dinner, and I'd take the 2 kids down to the beach, and we'd play in the beach for about 45 minutes or an hour. She developed cancer. Was it ovarian, Marianne? Ovarian cancer. And it was a sort of a gradual, lengthy process for going downhill. Probably the doctors weren't quite as sharp then as they are today, maybe.
What got you through? What got you through that crisis in your life?
I'm not sure what got me through that. Maybe the fact that I need to be concerned about my kids, you know, their feelings. I was, I guess my concern for them was what got me through it the best. I started that, I guess, back in, well, when I retired from work. I retired from practice in 93, I think. And so I started first with softball. Softball was pretty big then with the retirees. And we'd play in inter-season tournaments, and if we did well, we'd progress on to state tournaments and even national tournaments. So Marianne and I have been to, oh, let's say we've been to Houston. Last year, or the last sporting event was in Louisville, Kentucky. That was a basketball, senior men's basketball tournament. And the age bracket was 80 and over, and I just did qualify. I was 79, but I would be 80 later that calendar year. So there were 500 teams in our bracket, age bracket, and we played each of the 5. Or was there six other teams maybe? It seems like we played 6 games and won all 6. We won all the games we played. So I was proud to go out in a blaze of glory. We probably won 4 or 5 championships over the years. And we had about the same guys playing with us every year, so that was important. Marianne Cantwell. And we met on Appalachian Trail Hike. This was a Florida Methodist church program for adults. And so she was living in Vero Beach and I was living in Clermont, and we met and became friends. We were both married at the time. Then later we became single. And
well, I actually met Gene many years before I got to know him. I was going on a trail hike, and it was my very first one, and he brought a friend of his from Clermont to his first trail hike. He brought him up to Leesburg, and he'd loaned him a bunch of camping equipment and stuff, and so he took him up to the Warren Willis camp at Leesburg, which is where we met. And so I actually met him that morning as a friend of someone who was going on the hike. I didn't remember that because it was just a in passing thing. But then several years later, I continued to go annually on this Appalachian trail hike that was sponsored by the Florida Conference of the Church, where I got to know Gene Cantwell. Was on a backpacking trip. And I just thought he was a really nice guy. You get to know people really well when you're backpacking with them. You're out in the wilderness, you're far from civilization, there's no lights, there's no telephone, there's no TV, and this is back before people commonly had cell phones. And you rely on each other for all of the things that you need to do to get through your day. He and I were both long-legged and liked to move fast, so we hiked quite a bit together. And I like to sing. I sing all the time. And so I would sing when I was hiking, and he really liked that. He would just name a hymn and I'd sing it for him as we're hiking along. Well, our wedding was outdoors, and it was only about a mile from my house in Vero Beach. And I remember, getting up, getting dressed, getting ready to go, getting in the car and driving to where the wedding was going to take place, and seeing Gene pacing back and forth. He was very antsy. He wanted to get the show on the road. And I think it was time for the wedding to start, and I had forgotten my flowers. I left my flowers at home. And I looked at my dad and said, I forgot my flowers. I need my flowers. And Gene's looking at his watch. It's time to get started. But I insisted that my father run back to the house and get my flowers. It was, 2 minutes away, but
we have 7 grandchildren.
And what do your grandkids call you?
Grandpa. Instead of the accent on the last syllable, it's on the first syllable. Grandpa.
And what's your favorite thing about being a grandpa?
I guess the affection they show. Would be the greatest thing that I see with the grandchildren.
he is a fabulous grandpa. The grandkids have just always adored him. And on more than one occasion, he would look at me and say, there's just no feeling in the world like walking in the room and seeing that little face light up because you walked in. So it's been fun watching him with the kids. And he just, he enjoys them so much and they just love him to death. Grandpa's a pushover. He likes ice cream. And of course, the grandchildren like ice cream. So I've got to get rid of the tears. Get a tissue. All they have to do is ask Grandpa, can we have some ice cream? Or will you make us a milkshake? And it's sure, because he wants one too. So they think Grandpa's great because he gives them ice cream and he plays with them. And he's wonderful with them and they love him to death. When I married Jean, was like marrying my best friend. We had gotten to know each other and we shared so many common interests, and it was just wonderful having somebody in my life that I could share my life with, because I'd never had that before. I love him. He is a wonderful man.
Well, it was good having Gene for an older brother. He and I grew up pretty much together, and one thing I liked about him was that he let me tag along whenever he goes somewhere. And he and I were pretty close when we were young. As we got older, we weren't quite as close, but we're still good friends. I valued him as an older brother.
I don't know. I think about it sometimes. And everybody has a different viewpoint, so it can't be what everybody wants or expects. So I figured it out. I don't have to know what it's like. All I know is the afterlife will be fair. We will all get our just desserts, whatever they are. And we don't have to worry about deciding what it's going to be. It'll be what it is. So there's no need to, I don't fret about it. I rarely think about it. No. I think with my attitude, I don't. It's going to be fair. Well, I hope they would think of me as a person of integrity, sense of humor. I'm not sure what else. Just a person of, honesty. And I hope they think I was positive factor in some people's lives. I guess that's it.